Welcome back to Rich Dad StockCast. I'm your host, Denney, and today's episode might just flip the way that you think about work forever. We're diving into one of the most misunderstood lessons from Rich Dad Poor Dad. Work to learn, don't work for money. Most people work for a paycheck, but the rich, they work for skills, knowledge, and opportunities that build wealth. And joining me today is Rich Dad expert Andy Tanner, who has lived this lesson and teaches others how to apply it every day. And before we get started, head over to stockcastbonus.com and grab your free investing tools and checklists. If you're ready to focus on learning how money works, those resources are your first step. Let's jump in. Andy, welcome back to the show.
Gee, Dale, thanks for having me. You always introduce me so kindly, and I always look at myself as a student and a striver. So when you say, "Oh, Andy's lived this," well, Andy's tried to live it the best he can. So it's a great principle, and it's a great one to speak about and focus on. So it's going to be a good podcast.
Speaking of things to focus on, stockcastbonus.com, what do our listeners receive when they go there?
We created that for people who wanted to act. I've been speaking about this more and more lately. I see lots of content creation, and I see tons of content consumption. But what if the ratio of time spent acting on these things, uh, correlated to at least the time spent, consuming these things? And I think some people get tired of that. They say, "Hey, I watch a lot of content, but I'm not moved. I don't see a change in my financial statement." So at stockcastbonus.com, we have free resources where people can have step-by-step action and start doing stuff. So if you want to move the needle and do some things, go check out those free tools.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Now, going back to the book Rich Dad Poor Dad, most people grew up being told, get a good job, work hard. Everyone's heard this. I think we all can relate to it. But in Rich Dad Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki says that that's not enough. Why is it so important to work to learn and not just earn?
Well, I think it's a context issue and a focus issue. I mean, what did the author say? Well, he said the rich don't work for money at the beginning, and then the first lesson was rich don't work for money. The sixth lesson was the rich work to learn. I remember, my son spent a lot of time with Robert Kiyosaki and Kim Kiyosaki, and I remember Robert used to tell them about different areas of education. He says, you have professional education where you learn. Robert learned how to drive. He could drive a boat. He could drive a plane. Right. He went to the Merchant Marine Academy and learned how that stuff worked. So you have a professional education. You also have what Robert calls spiritual education. I would call that personal development. How is your discipline? How's your spirit? How is your attitude? How is your context? And then you have, financial education. So he used to tell them that money, comes from your imagination. Money, big wealth anyway, comes from how many people can you serve and how creative can you be in how you serve those people. And really, if a person has a job, they serve a boss, but when a person serves the world, they get richer. So, working to learn and filling your mind with things is really key to what you're going to create. And so, yeah, the rich work to get smarter. There's a lot of people in the advice culture. I love this conversation, Del, because a lot of people in the advice culture frame success as choosing the right asset, or maybe even the right asset class. Oh, business is better than stocks, or real estate is better than crypto, or whatever. They have those as if the success were asset dependent rather than investor dependent. I think it's pretty clear that if you look at elite guys like Warren Buffett, they've developed their mind tremendously, and they spend most of their time learning. Really is true. Bill Gates and Warren Buffett went to Columbia, and they were speaking to some of the MBA students there, and they did a Q&A, and they asked Bill Gates and Warren Buffett the same question. They said, "What's the most important thing you do every day?" And Bill Gates, without a second, said, "Learn."
All right, Andy. So that's a great thing that you mentioned about Warren Buffett and skill sets. So my question is, what are the skill sets that we should focus on to build wealth? For example, Warren Buffett, one of the things that random skill sets that he had was public speaking. He went to, I think it was a Dale
Did.
Carnegie course early on to learn public speaking skills. But what should we learn? What
Yeah,
skill sets should we develop?
the rumor is, I think it's true. The rumor is that he doesn't have his degree from the Columbia on the wall, but he does have his graduation certificate from Dale Carnegie Public Speaking. And they
How
did some
interesting.
crazy things to get outside their comfort zone. But Warren Buffett started investing his own money, I think at 9 years old is when he bought his first stock. But later on, when he really got going, he did raise capital. And Robert Kiyosaki has said this 1,000 times. He said, talk about skills. The number one skill of an entrepreneur is raising capital. That's what he believes it is. It's a sales job. You're always selling as an entrepreneur all the time. That's why we like stocks. We get a click and sell instead of having to give a sales pitch to anybody. But Warren, he did. He learned how to raise capital, and that's really where his investing took off. Is he wasn't just investing his money; he started investing for others. And the attitude and the way he went about that, I think, is unique. I think it's a great standard. So, yeah, I think the ability to communicate and sell whatever your wares are as an entrepreneur is a huge thing. If you don't like that, paper assets are really nice because they're what we call liquid, where the buying and selling is done by clicking the mouse. But if you're going to be in real estate or really any other business, knowing how to communicate and sell is certainly one of those big skills. But I also think there's a lot of others when it comes to personal development. I say it all the time, and people can believe it or not, but most people, when they think I want to work to learn investing, they think they're going to learn terminology, which is true. Things like in stocks, we have strike prices and Greeks and deltas and gammas and, what's a gamma squeeze? We have all this jargon, but there's also an element of things that go beyond just investing, things that would work for an athlete, things that would work for a musician, things that would work for a dancer or someone in the arts, which is discipline and consistency and an even temperament and the ability to make wise decisions under pressure, the ability to manage emotions, because when emotions goes up, intelligence drops. There's a lot of when we work to learn, we work to learn not just about the numbers and the financial statements and the balance sheets, but we work to learn about ourselves. There's a sage, the oldest or first of the great Greek sages, is a guy named Thales of Miletus. And I've taken an interest in his life for two reasons. Number one, it's widely accepted he was the guy who who had technically the first option contract. He was a philosopher. He was often ridiculed because he didn't spend his time, looking for money. He just sat around philosophizing with and you can picture him among the marble columns philosophizing. And he was quite an astronomer. He predicted an eclipse, and he thought based on stars and movements and meteorology, he said, we're going to have a bumper olive crop. So Thales of Miletus went out and he got leases on all the olive presses, all of them. And so he had a monopoly on that. And when the olive crop came and he had control of all the presses, the intrinsic value of the option to use those presses was huge. And he sold those contracts and made, a zillion, gold coins or whatever they had back then, and he also said this, though, which I think comes back to learning. He said, know thyself. And that's a learning that I think is that investing will help you a lot with, because you'll learn what you're made of when markets tank. You'll learn what you're made of when you make a big mistake. You'll learn what you're made of when you have to buy when everyone else is selling. And that's literally true. When you look at stock charts, the very best prices ever in real estate or stock is when everyone else is selling and they've driven those prices down. So you really have to have a lot of personal development and strength and ability to go against the crowd. and do the things that normal, regular, everyday people, their emotions don't let them do. So it's quite a learning process, I think, working to learn.
Now, speaking of learning processes, Robert talked about from his own mind, raising capital is one of the most important skill sets. But thinking back on your own personal journey, your own investing journey, what's some other skill sets that have been really valuable for you to learn in your own career?
Well, I learned like Warren Buffett did. I'm not as good as he is, but I very much learned how to sell. I learned those same things. I broke into sales when I was a really really young man. I sold. That's what got me into stocks. I was selling software that would help chart stocks and research stocks, and way back when they first started doing online trading, when the brokerages all went digital and people started making their own decisions. So selling software was a big deal. But it's not only when you think about working to learn, learning is a skill. I just lost a very important mentor, and I was reflecting, at his passing, I was reflecting on what I learned from him or learnt from him. And it's interesting. He says we learn better when the subject matter is given meaning to us. So if you put me in a classroom and you say, "Hey, memorize this because I said so," and it's just numbers, then it had no meaning. There was no emotional connection to my biology or physiology to let my brain know, "Hey, this is actually worth learning. It's really important to learn, and I'll help you retain this because I see the meaning of it." If the information seems meaningless, then that's a big deal. And that's where financial education is actually easy to teach people, because they can feel the meaning of that inherently. They know that money is something they'll have to have. So learning how to learn and attaching an emotional component to that is something I learned from that mentor, and something that he gave to me. And so, yeah, learning. Robert used to talk about how to learn all the time, about how to give something mass, is what he used to call it, to turn it into an object rather than just out in the ethereal. He also was adamant that when we studied books, you didn't interject your own opinions that you brought with you into what was being studied, because then you don't learn anything. You're just injecting old information into new information. So he had this thing called "What Did the Author Say?" And we always began with quoting, exactly understanding what the author said, and check our opinions at the door. We can evaluate whether we believe the author later on, but we don't want to miss him because we're dogmatic. So there was a lot about learning that I observed, from my great teachers and mentors, of how to learn every day. You have to put time in every day. That's a skill, to set aside away. My wife laughs because I wasn't a good student. She knew me in college when we were together, and she knew I hated school. I hated every freaking minute of it. And yet she'll shake her head and says, I've never met someone that loved learning more than you, Andy, but hated school more at the same time. Well, that's because I wanted to learn what I wanted to learn, not what the teachers, prescribed. I wanted the subjects that weren't in school because they had more meaning to me. The subjects that are taught outside of school were more important to me than what was inside of school.
I think a lot of us can relate to that. Well, let's do this. Let's take a quick break. We've just unpacked why the wealthy focus on learning, not just earning. But after the break, Andy's going to show us exactly what to learn, how those specific skills translate directly into wealth. And if you're ready to start learning and to get smarter, go to stockcastbonus.com. That's where you'll get your free resources that'll help you to level up fast. Stick around. We'll be right back.
So far, it's been great. I needed a source where I could really enrich my education through stocks. I didn't really have an avenue for it, and it's helped me a lot. The simplicity has really gotten me on the track to where I enjoy the learning, as well as it's really solidifying in my mind. And like, they're not just trying to sell you something, they really care about the people that are in the course, and they really do care about you and your personal goals, and what you want to do is to help you and your family and whatever your goals are in life through that. So it's really been great.
Welcome back to Rich Dad StockCast. I'm here with Andy Tanner, and now we're going deeper. How do you take the work to learn mindset and turn it into real wealth? Now, Andy, what are the most important money skills you'd recommend someone to start learning immediately? So someone that's just fresh out of the gate, what are we focusing on?
Well, if you really want to do it well, in my opinion, this is a disqualifier for a lot of the audience. So a lot of people will be able to disqualify themselves right out of the gate with this statement. And they'll say, well, I guess I'm not going to be wealthy because most people don't like this idea. Some, if they embrace it, it's a huge personal growth. Is that probably among the best things you can learn, and the best teacher is going to be your mistakes. When you can embrace action and say, I'm just going to go do something. I'm going to try to learn this by doing this. And then when you screw up, you're going to learn really quick, really well. It'll have meaning for sure. And most people won't do that. Most people are not figured out people. There's a saying we used to have, and Robert used to say this, and I love this. He'd say, professionals solve problems and the amateurs cause them. And as a business owner, you see that happen all the time. People on your team that seem to create problems, and people on your team that just always solve them. And so the willingness to make a mistake, the willingness to just be a self-starter and go do things, and not wait to be told what to do, not wait, to kind of ready, fire, aim a little bit to get going and just take some action and learn that you're actually more bulletproof than you think. Because financial mistakes can't, they don't harm you physically. They set you back, but you learn so much if you keep going. So I would say top of the list, best teacher ever for me is making mistakes, is losing money first before you learn to make it. I've made mistakes in every asset class multiple times, and that's how experience comes, and that's how you learn. So I would say number one, top of the list, is the skill of not wasting a great mistake, and also the willingness to make a few and to have some risk bite you. It's a great way to learn about risk, and it's usually not fatal. It's usually not physically harmful. It's just financial. So that's a big one. Is just get over the fear of making mistakes. Then I think a person can really start to learn.
All right. I couldn't agree more, even though the pain that we go through is helps in the long run. Looking back, those pain hurt, but I grew so much from pain. But thinking about that, all right, accepting mistakes, my
Yep.
next area of skill set. What should I focus on?
Well, if you want to be pedantic, right? If you want to say, well, let's be traditional, what are the books I could read, or the things I can learn? I think financial education starts with the book Rich Dad Poor Dad and learning how a financial statement works. One of the things in Rich Dad Poor Dad that I think made it what it is one simple thing. Robert removed numbers from the financial statement and replaced them with arrows. And that simple move of removing numbers and putting arrows there, it just brilliantly showed people how cash moved and what cash flow was, how it flowed through. And I think the ability to read a financial statement, we call that a fundamental analysis in the industry. That's a fancy term for knowing how to look at the important stuff. Is you begin to be able to diagnose things the same way a doctor would. When we go to the doctor, I often use this metaphor. I could have a bone sticking out of my arm here and blood everywhere, and they'd still say, Mr. Tanner, let's step on the scale and get your weight, get your BMI. So they bring in this special scale that can handle it, and they say, are you serious? I go, I got a bone sticking out. They go, oh, good, yeah, let's use the other arm to take your blood pressure. So there's just certain metrics and certain things that make a body run well, and when you learn those, you can make predictions about health and physical things. For example, a doctor could look at 100 random people, and he might not pick the winner of the 5K, but he can pick the guy who would never finish it. And so as an investor, we might not pick the best company, but we're not going to pick the one that's going bankrupt. And so it reduces risk. So an ability to read a financial statement is a huge deal.
Mm. I absolutely agree with that. Now thinking, last question here for you. For someone that's listening right now, thinking, I want to start working smarter, not just harder. What's one simple, actionable step that they can take this week to begin learning the skills that lead to wealth?
Uh, there's a lot of things. I mean, well, we can segue and use that as an opportunity to plug StockCastBonus.com for sure. I mentioned the ability to read a financial statement. What's there right now? We've got a downloadable book that helps people turn that into action and actually learn how to change a financial statement. It's one thing to learn what they are. It's another thing to know how to change yours. And it's like key performance indicators. How do you tweak certain numbers and change what the financial statement looks like? That's a huge part of entrepreneurship, is being able to look at a business and find the different numbers that need to be tweaked and start learning how to tweak them and figuring out how to tweak them. So yeah, that financial statement's a big deal, and learn how to tweak it. So go to StockCast Bonus. That's actionable. Another thing is to get teachers in your life and mentors in your life. Warren Buffett constantly credits Benjamin Graham. Robert Kiyosaki constantly credits his Rich Dad. Phil Town credits the Wolf. Everyone had a mentor. Everyone does. I've had mentors. People, books are good. I often say that books are for people who are interested in success, but coaches, mentors, teachers are those are people who are committed to success. If you were going to commit to a gold medal, you were going to win a gold medal in whatever event, you would be less likely to be a person who read a book about it and more likely to be a person who had a coach in that area of your life. So coaches, mentors, teachers, if you want to work to learn, start hanging out with people you can learn from.
Fantastic.
That's something you could do like 2 days. So, making mistakes, learning how to learn, having mentors in your life, choosing teachers, setting aside time for learning every single week, and reading and just really focusing on getting smarter.
Well said, Andy. Well, that wraps up our episode of Rich Dad StockCast. Here's the truth. If you only work for money, you'll always trade time for dollars. But if you work to learn, you'll gain the skills that you pay for life. Andy, huge thank you for making this lesson so practical. There's so many insights there. I greatly appreciate that. And listeners, if you're ready to start learning the smart way, go to stockcastbonus.com. That's where we've got some free tools and resources and checklists to help you grow on your money mindset, investing skill set. So if you got value from this episode, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share this with someone who's ready to stop chasing paychecks and start learning how to build wealth. And thanks for listening to Rich Dad StockCast. I'm Denney. Stay smart, stay invested, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Del.
This podcast is a presentation of Rich Dad Media Network.